Hello and welcome to the programme where we get to the heart of the day's stories and communities across Scotland. Tonight, a stark insight into pressures in the care sector. Families with relatives in an Edinburgh home threatened with closure say they fear some won't survive the stress of being forced to relocate. So what's the state of the wider care sector? We'll ask the group representing providers. Also tonight, the leader of the Scottish Conservatives says it's understandable that people are protesting outside hotels housing asylum seekers. We'll find out what polling says on the issue.
Islands in the stream, that is what we are.
And as Edinburgh's festivals draw to a close, we'll pick out the highlights of the world-famous events. And we'll have all the sport with Lewis. What have we got tonight?
Well, Fiona, we'll assess how Celtic and Rangers are placed as they head into crucial tests away from home in their bid to reach the Champions League.
Hello, I'm Fiona Stalker. Welcome to the News at 7. Now it's another example of a sector under pressure. Families with relatives in an Edinburgh care home threatened with closure say they're worried some elderly residents won't survive the stress of being forced to move. Eagle Lodge is one of two homes in the capital affected by the Salvation Army's decision to withdraw from providing residential care services in favour of community-based support. The charity says no final decision's been made and insists the homes won't close until an alternative is found. Here's what some families with relatives in the home had to say.
It was a complete shock. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Couldn't believe that they were saying that Eagle Lodge was being considered for closure. Completely came out of the blue and just really, really worrying time.
There will be some people that will struggle to actually move and may not survive a move. My mum's pretty tough, even at 104, but she is vulnerable, there's no doubt about that.
Well, let's discuss all this with Donald McCaskill of the industry body Scottish Care. Donald, good evening to you. Thank you for being with us. How much distress does this cause to residents and families, a situation like this?
A care home is somebody's home, and every effort is made to make it as familiar and as personal as possible. So can you imagine being told with very short notice that the place which you thought was going to be your last home, bearing in mind how old some of these residents are and many residents who face their care home closing are, it's really distressing, it's upsetting, it's not good on any level for the resident, the families and the staff.
Donald, why do situations like this happen? Why are some care homes having to close?
An awful lot of care homes are having to make really hard choices and decisions, in particular smaller rural and remote providers, but also those in the city. And the main reason is that they are simply not making enough money to keep the doors open. That's true if you're a charity or a private provider. There has been gross underfunding of the residential and nursing care home sector for many years. And now, sadly, particularly as a result of the UK government's national insurance increase, all the portents are coming together to a really negative picture.
Well, Donald, the Scottish Government gave us a statement. They say it's exceeded its commitment to increase funding by 25% to almost 350 million. And at 21.7 billion, the overall financial envelope for health and social care reached record levels. What's your reaction to that?
You can't dispute the statistics because they're true, but they only say and tell part of the story. We have health and social care partnerships. Those are the bodies who buy public care, and most of the care homes, 70% of those who are resident in care homes, are paid for by the state. The public bodies are £500 million in debt. We urgently need the government to invest in allowing those public bodies to purchase care, be it in their people in their own home or in care homes.
Donald, I know it's a complex issue, but if you wouldn't mind, just to be brief on this, because there are large providers that do make large profits, should they not be doing more?
That's a myth, Fiona, because if you're talking about public funded care in Scotland, the profit ratio within the national model is 4%. If those providers, and in Scotland 67% of providers are small, charitable, not-for-profit and small private, if providers are making money, they are not making it from Scottish care home residents who are paid through the national contract. We have to scotch that myth because it's doing nobody any good. The truth is, most care homes are on their knees.
All right, Donald, well, thank you. We'll speak again, no doubt. Thank you for that. That's Donald McCaskill there from Scottish Care, the industry provider. Now, the environmental regulator SEPA has announced restrictions on water use because of dwindling supplies. Reservoirs and rivers in the east of the country are at unusually low levels after the driest spring since 1964 and a hot summer. Farmers who take supplies from rivers in Aberdeenshire and North Fife will now be subject to specific limits. Well, our Scotland editor James Cook has this report.
Scotland is known for its rainfall, a soggy and green nation. Not this year. In the east especially, water levels are way below average after the driest spring since 1964 and a hot summer too.
So we're at Backwater Reservoir today, and the reservoir that you see in front of us is about half full.
How unusual is that?
So this is the second time in the last 40 years it's been this low. And where we're standing right now, we would, at top water level, be underwater. It's a precious natural resource, and our water environment is something we should be rightly proud of, but it's also something that we should take responsibility for.
But people think Scotland rains all the time.
That might be the perception, but I think the reservoir at this level demonstrates that that's not the case.
In response, Scottish Water is shifting supplies around the country by road, here filling up the underground tanks which supply the Angus town of Kirriemuir. It's not just tanks and reservoirs that are running low. This is the mighty Tay, Scotland's longest river, and it is way below average. In a nation which uses far more water per person than England and Wales, this may be a sign that we need to think twice before turning on the tap.
We've got about the same population as the county of Yorkshire in England, but they use 40% less water than we do as a population in Scotland. And as we draw water from the natural environment, it has a big impact on ecology and biodiversity.
And on agriculture too. On Mearns of Cairnborough Farm in Aberdeenshire, the springs have run dry, leaving Nicola Wordy literally pushing water uphill.
We're going up at least once, if not twice a day, to fill this cistern to make sure that the cows in this field here on our left and then the younger stock beyond them have got enough water to survive, basically.
It's not long since the farm had the opposite problem, drenched by record-breaking rainfall. Climate scientists call the swings between these extremes weather whiplash. How unusual is this?
Very, very. I mean, when you look at last year when we were the total opposite and it was wet for months on end, and now it's the total opposite and we're dry for months on end. It's the one extreme to the other is what we're now having to face, and we are going to have to adapt, I think, to this.
We'll all have to adapt. Parched farmland pushes up the price of food, and falling rivers make water more precious than ever. James Cook, BBC News, Aberdeenshire.
Well, the A9 between Perth and Inverness has a reputation as one of Scotland's most dangerous roads, and the casualty figures certainly reinforce that. Between 2014 and last year, 48 people lost their lives on the 113-mile stretch. 558 others were involved in collisions. The wife and two other family members of an American man, Chris Strong, never returned from a holiday to visit filming locations for the TV show Outlander. 3 years after their deaths, Chris has spoken to BBC Scotland about what happened.
Katie was driving and she was going to make a right-hand turn off of A9, and she turned right in front of a lorry. I don't know why you can take a driver's license from the US and just jump straight into a car in the UK. Your license is just instantly transferable. I personally think there should be restrictions on that also. We try to talk about her a lot. I feel like she's still very, like a presence in our home, very much so. A lot of times it'll just, mention, you know, like, oh, mom would have liked this song, or keep her active in our lives in a way as much as we can.
Well, the Scottish Government had initially aimed to upgrade the entire route from Perth to Inverness as dual carriageway by this year. The timetable has since slipped back to 2035, but the Transport Secretary insists that solid progress has been made.
Road safety is something, as Cabinet Secretary for Transport, I take extremely seriously. And in terms of the A9, what we have done is we've also invested £5 million on interim, shorter term road safety issues. We're not waiting just for the dualling. The dualling in and of itself will help on road safety, and that's one of the reasons that clearly we've embarked on it. But obviously my sympathy goes out to any family.
Well, for many living along the route, change isn't happening quickly enough. Laura Hunster has led the campaign to see the A9 dualled and spoke to me earlier about her frustration.
Very frustrated because there's nothing new being said, and I'm getting quite heartedly sick about hearing about this £5 million. That £5 million was promised by Jenny Gilruth back in 2022, and I'm afraid in everyday money this £5 million is not. It's not enough. It's never going to be enough to make the amount of road safety changes we need on the entirety of the A9 at Perth to Inverness.
Would you accept the argument that some drivers are inherently dangerous and therefore it's perhaps difficult to put measures in place road-wise that can prevent this?
I think what we have to try and achieve here is we are never going to negate complete driver fault. And I don't like the buck being passed on to victim blaming, you know, because there's many innocent lives that are being caught up in this victim blaming kind of scenario of it's not the road, it's the drivers, and it gets exceptionally tiring because there is such a thing as a very badly designed road. You know, we have to be looking at driver styles and behaviours too. Should we be allowing people to come off long haul flights and jump into hire cars? Absolutely not, because they're exhausted and they don't know the style of roads here, they don't know the road network. But what can we actually do? That's down to a Westminster government to change this, because again, we're getting sick and tired of hearing the excuse of it's not a national standard. So it gets very frustrating. And if we can't get our tourists over here safely and get them on their holidays safely, then we're actually really, really failing them.
The pledge is, of course, that the road will be completed in 2035. How confident are you that that will happen?
We've got to bear in mind that in the last 15 and a half years now, we've actually only had 11 miles dualled. So, you know, that's a heck of a lot of road they're wanting to do in the next 10 years. You're looking at 77 plus miles in the next 10 years. So, you know, I've got to be realistic here. That maths does not add up.
All right. Well, Laura Hansler, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Well, there's more on that story on Yorpa on BBC Alpa tonight at 9. It's also available now on iPlayer. Now let's get a roundup of the stories making the BBC News app in Scotland. The number of suspected crimes reported to police at Scotland's airports has increased by 40% in 2 years, with almost 8,000 incidents in 2024. ScotRail's to replace a controversial AI voice on trains after criticism from a professional voiceover artist. Transport Scotland says the rail operator now plans to introduce an alternative voice soon. A housing association, The Borders, is converting garages into homes in a bid to ease the current crisis, with 7 bungalows in Jedburgh and 6 needing completion in Hawick. And for more on all those stories, you can scan the QR code on the screen now. It'll take you to the BBC Scotland News app, where there are more for you, including how screenwriter Paul Laverty has been arrested in Edinburgh for showing support for a proscribed organisation following a pro-Palestine protest. The leader of the Scottish Conservatives have said it is understandable that people are protesting outside of asylum hotels in parts of Scotland. Russell Finlay told BBC Scotland News that lawful protest is entirely reasonable. Mr Finlay took questions after a speech in which he called for councils in Scotland to be given more power and larger budgets in order to ensure decisions on asylum accommodation are made at a more localised level.
Well, we've seen instances where horrific cases where, for example, there was a young female in Scotland who was raped by someone who came to this country illegally after having made their way through numerous safe European countries. And it's understandable in those circumstances why communities would question the entire integrity and safety of the immigration system.
So where do Scots really stand on the issue of asylum seekers and immigration more broadly? Earlier, I asked polling expert Mark Diffley of the Diffley Partnership to explain.
So in our latest survey, which is coming out this week, where we ask the public to name 3 issues which are of greatest concern, which in the words of the question are the most important issues facing Scotland. The NHS and the economy are still significantly out ahead. So about half respondents say the NHS in their top 3 and 37% say the economy. But immigration is now mentioned by more than 1 in 5, so by 21%. So it is now the issue of third most concern to the public. And what's interesting is that this has been now happening now for sort of 12 months or so. So if we go back to the middle of 2023, so only about 2 years ago, the equivalent question, only 4% of the population mentioned immigration as amongst their top 3 concerns. So you can see that in that last couple of years, concern about immigration has grown by about a factor of 5.
And Mark, who in Scotland is most likely to put immigration as the top concern?
So we see patterns amongst the electorate in Scotland similar to across the UK. The numbers are smaller in Scotland, but the patterns are the same. So it tends to be older voters, so particularly those in their 50s and 60s. So about a third of that cohort mentions immigration in their top 3, and that compares to only about 15% of those aged 16 to 34, so about double. So age is one of the biggest predictors. Depends where you live in Scotland as well. So those that live in Scotland's most deprived and poor neighbourhoods tend to be more concerned about immigration than those who live in Scotland's more affluent neighbourhoods.
What do you think the impact of this will be on the Scottish elections not that far away now?
Well, I mean, it's an interesting question. We now have, of course, Reform UK, for whom immigration is one of their absolute key issues, who did well in the recent Hamilton by-election for the Holyrood Parliament, and are polling at a level where they are likely at this point to get quite good representation or significant representation in the Scottish Parliament. What makes that important is that for people like me, that kind of means that I think the issue of immigration will play a greater role than it has in previous Holyrood elections, and is likely to be quite a divisive issue in a way that it hasn't been in the past.
Mark Diffley there. Still to come, we'll have the weather with Chris, and we'll report on a steady showing at the box office as Edinburgh's festivals come to a close. But first, it's sport with Lewis.
Thanks very much, Fiona. Good evening. This time tomorrow night, the second leg of Celtic's hugely significant Champions League playoff tie against Kairat will be well underway in the Kazakh city of Almaty. It was 0-0 in the first leg. The match kicks off at 5:45 UK time on Tuesday at Central Stadium. Celtic eager to progress to rub shoulders with Europe's best and collect the £16 million reward for reaching the league phase. Brendan Rodgers says his players haven't been sidetracked by the 3,000-mile journey or the 30-degree heat. Instead, they'll be fully focused on getting the job done.
There's no excuse for us, especially when you see how well Kairat worked last week. So they had the same journey going the other way. So that won't be an excuse for us. And I think, as I said, we all feel fine. We feel great. We're on our own time zone, and like I say, we'll prepare, and there'll be no excuse.
Well, our sports news correspondent Chris McLaughlin joins us now on what was a big week for 4 Scottish clubs in Europe. Sticking with Celtic just now though, Chris, and how important is reaching the Champions League for their season?
Yeah, it's quite simply huge, Lewis. The Champions League is where Celtic as a club and its fans think they should be. There is a little bit unrest, of course, at Celtic Park because the fans believe they should have had more in the way of transfers and transfer activity. That's led to some chants of sack the board inside Celtic Park, something we haven't heard for a couple of decades in the East End of Glasgow. So yeah, it's really, really big for Celtic. There's no doubt about that. And of course, we know that this game against Kairat is going to be tricky. But the expectations at Celtic Park are absolutely sky high. The difference with Celtic and Rangers, and we'll talk about Rangers in a second, at Celtic they expect to be in the Champions League. The Rangers fans would like to be in the Champions League. The Celtic fans expect it.
Absolutely, and you mentioned Rangers there, Chris, and before we do get your opinion on their trip to Bruges, let's hear what Russell Martin had to say after their 1-1 draw with St Mirren at the weekend.
It's also not like the end of the world. 8 weeks in, you usually have 2 or 3 games played by now. We've been 8 weeks and had so many games, we've gone straight into the fire of European games and stuff like that. So I'm under no illusion. The window needs to shut. Everyone needs to be all in when that happens. Everyone needs to be all in for the next 2 games before it happens. And we can make things feel very different next week.
Yeah, Chris, so Rangers not only go to Belgium 3-1 down, but of course Hamza Agaman refusing to come on. There's a lot to talk about, isn't there? How important is it that they steady their season?
Yeah, so much unrest at Rangers. Of course, 3 games into the league season, just 3 draws. The Rangers fans are already questioning Russell Martin. When he was unveiled, I remember saying to you, Lewis, right here, he had to hit the ground running because quite a sizable portion of the Rangers fans didn't fancy that appointment. He is struggling, there's no doubt about that, and with huge games coming up against Club Brugge and then Celtic next Sunday, that pressure on Russell Martin is only going to intensify.
Certainly is. Chris McLaughlin, thanks for your analysis as always. OK, now we're going to move to the national team now because Steve Clarke has named his squad for next month's World Cup qualifiers as Scotland launch their bid to reach next year's tournament hosted in the USA, Canada and Mexico. And here is the 25-man squad selected for 2 difficult opening matches away from home against Denmark and Belarus. Some names to point out for you there. Defender Aaron Hickey, he's back after nearly 2 years of injury struggles. Grant Hanley, now at Hibs, is joined alongside his club teammate Kieran Bowie, one of 4 strikers in the squad. And I know that you might be trying to count them there, but of the 8 midfielders, 4 of them are plying their trade in Italy's Serie A. Incredible. So how does the head coach feel heading into such important games?
We want to be in the major tournaments. We've spoken about it. We don't want to wait since 1998, since the last World Cup. That's a long time. I think it's probably too long. So hopefully this time we can put it right. You live on pressure in this game. If you don't thrive on the pressure, you're probably better hanging up your boots, or in my case, my whistle and my stopwatch. It's something that comes with the territory. I think I mentioned pressure, but at the same time I also mentioned excitement because you're excited for the challenge. It's a really short qualifying campaign, 6 games, and we'll be ready to go.
And as always, there's plenty more for you on the BBC Sport website, including further reading on that Scotland squad announced today, as well as further reading still to build up to those big European games this week. Remember, Aberdeen and Hibs are in action on Thursday. So, Fiona, I think it's going to be a very busy week for us in the sport team.
Isn't it? Absolutely. But you've got your shacket on, your
I'm ready, I'm geared up,
shirt
ready
and
to
a jacket.
go.
It's great.
Not quite as colourful as you, unfortunately, Fiona.
Thank you so much, Lewis.
Cheers.
Now, the Edinburgh Festival Fringe has come to a close with a total of 2.6 million tickets sold for close to 4,000 shows. Performers came from dozens of countries around the world. Our arts correspondent, Polly McLean, reports.
When you ring your roses, a puppet smell the posy. 3.5 weeks, 3,500 shows from 63 countries. And that's just the Fringe, one of 6 summer festivals which drew to a close this weekend. And the biggest problem, as always, was finding a space for them all.
That's always been a challenge, accommodation during Fringe. And also a lot of hotels do not want student groups, especially during the Fringe, where the students can create a little bit of a ruckus. So what we did was this time, we managed both our groups. The one with 40 and the 66, we managed to accommodate in Glasgow. Of course, there was a little bit of a journey time that we do up and down every day. But then the plus point is we see another city.
I love you, baby, and if it's quite all right, I need you, baby.
And in another part of the city, they're getting a chance to see the Fringe. This is the 3rd year of the Fringe Carefest, which takes shows out to those who can no longer get to the venues.
Having spoken to a few residents and sort of spoken to their families, it is kind of difficult now to access everything at the Fringe as it would normally, be just traffic and the amount of foot traffic. So to be able to bring that special piece of Edinburgh that they've enjoyed for you know, a long, long time, decades even, and being able to get out there, we can bring it here, and that just, I think it cements that feeling of home and belonging.
Islands in the stream, that is what we are. Nowhere in between, how can we go wrong?
And for artists like Australian drag queen Jackie Randa, it's every bit as rewarding as the main festival.
I find that coming to do these little gigs are just so much joy for me. I can see that it's lighting people's faces up, and it's getting something that they normally wouldn't be able to get to.
And don't assume she has to tone down her act for this crowd, who've been coming to the festival for years.
Actually, I have found that older crowds, they've been around the block. Like, they're totally up for it. So if I sneak a little bit in, they're more than happy with that as well.
Ice Cold Shakespeare, brand new Shakespeare.
As the curtain falls on all the festivals, the hope is they'll continue to reach across the city in years to come. Polly McLean, reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
Oh, it looks brilliant. Despite planning for a year, I didn't actually make one single show, but the weather looked good. And talking about being around the block, Christopher's here with the weather.
A big block, a very big block. Let's move swiftly on to the Weather Watcher photos, shall we? Lots of them coming in today because there was lots of sunshine and blue sky around from the capital right through towards the far north coast. Beautiful sunflower picture there, lovely white sand beach there. But actually, it's all about to change and turn. Let me show you what's happening because we've had high pressure for a long time now, but there's low pressure on the way. But let's talk about the temperatures. Today, mid to high 20s. Tomorrow, several degrees lower because when that low pressure arrives, it will also usher in something a little bit cooler and also wetter. It's the remnants of what was Hurricane Erin. Not a hurricane for us, but bringing an unsettled spell. And that spell starts tonight with rain moving west to east across the country, and it's still with us first thing tomorrow. You can see it there, a line from the borders up towards the far northeast. Elsewhere, reasonably dry with some morning brightness. Temperatures 15 to 17 Celsius. Bit of a breeze through the Minches and across the Hebrides. Same too around parts of the east coast and in towards the Northern Isles. Now, as we head through the course of the day, that rain in the east clears, and then we're left with a case of sunny spells and showers, really. Catch a shower could be heavy, the odd rumble of thunder. Temperatures respectable, but nothing like what we've seen today. That takes us to midweek. Wednesday, there's our low pressure sending in further weather fronts, and that means some pretty heavy rain, but perhaps not necessarily where we want it or where we need it. So on Wednesday, outbreaks of rain in towards the southwest, working their way north and eastwards, the odd rumble of thunder with that. Elsewhere, dry with the best of the sunshine. Temperatures 17 to 20 Celsius. But that wet weather will continue to trundle northwards into the evening. Thursday and Friday, you can see that low pressure still with us, but it's got some fairly sort of moist air trapped within it, tropical air I should say, and that means some of the showers will be quite heavy. A longer spell of rain towards the west coast, but for much of the mainland it's a case of slow moving showers with some rumbles of thunder. Friday is similar, very little in the way of wind because the low pressure is right overhead, so slow moving heavy downpours to come and a cooler, fresher feel. Here's the outlook. You can see what it means in numbers. 18, 19 Celsius with some showers or longer spells of rain at times. That's the forecast.
Do you know, there'll be gardeners, rivers and reservoirs who'll be very happy with that, Christopher.
With a little bit more as well, I should imagine.
Very, very happy with that. Thank you for that. That is it from us this evening. Big thanks to the team in the gallery and here in the studio. Laura McKeever will be here tomorrow night. Have a good one. Bye-bye.